Hey there, Rick Sage, recording at the Rimrock Studios in Bishop, California. Welcome to Season 2 of the Outdoor Biz Podcast, where I speak with retailers, brand managers, athletes, executives, and others in the outdoor biz and share their stories, tips, advice, productivity tricks, and ideas you can use to take your career or business to the next level. Today's podcast is brought to you by WordPress. I've used WordPress to build a number of websites, including Stillwater's Consulting and the Outdoor Biz Podcast. There are a number of themes and plugins available both free and for purchase, enabling you to easily create the custom look and feel you want. If you're starting an online business, publishing a blog, and looking to take your online presence to the next level, visit theoutdoorbizpodcast.com/WordPress and get going today. With simple installation tools and thousands of themes to choose from, you'll be up and running in no time. Go to theoutdoorbizpodcast.com/WordPress and get your site launched today. Hey guys, Rick here. Just want to give you a heads up that I'm taking a couple weeks off to work on the podcast as I prepare for Season 3 of the Outdoor Biz Podcast. No major changes, just a couple tweaks and adjustments to a few things. I have lots of great interviews in the works for Season 3, so please enjoy these replays of 4 of our most popular episodes from Season 2, and I'll be back with more great interviews, advice, stories, and insights in Season 3. Enjoy! I'm excited to have Brian Hennessy, CEO and co-founder of Talkoot and founder of Thre on the show today. As Brian so eloquently says, Thre is a writing studio that helps great brands like Adidas, Burton, Sims Fishing, and others tell their story, and Talkoot is a cloud-based platform that brings the dark ninja skills of content creators together in one bright, sunny, crazily useful place. Brian and I talk about how framing impacts brand stories and how a guy with a degree in economics got into storytelling. Hey Brian, great to speak with you today. Welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot, Rick.
Yeah,
great to be here.
Yeah, good to catch up again. We spoke a week or so ago. You kind of got me up to speed on all the cool things you're doing. Why don't you give us a little bit about your background before we go too far down the road?
Yeah, sure. I have a kind of story studio called Thre, and we help brands with their stories. It used to be mostly marketing. I started out as a copywriter, and eventually became a head writer at Adidas, kind of global head writer, overseeing the Adidas story. And then I left and started my own company. And at first we were doing a lot of just plain old copywriting and ads. But then I really got into story, and not just storytelling, but kind of deep what story is and how it works in our, ping pongs around our brain. And anymore, we're doing a lot of just story consulting, helping brands find their story and use it to do all sorts of things. Yeah,
I can't wait to dig into more of that. That's what intrigued me about our conversation last week. So I did a little research. Looks like you've got a degree in economics. How did you get into writing?
That is interesting. I got out of, none of my family went to college, and I was the first person in my family to go to college, and I thought everyone just kind of went to college to become a business person. And so economics sounded like a good, solid thing my mom would be proud of. And I got out of college, and I didn't know what to do. And I got a job at an advertising agency in marketing research. Leo Burnett, which is kind of the guys who invented Captain Crunch and Fruit of the Tony the Tiger. And it was there that I would show up with my, in Chicago with my slacks and my tie at 8:00 in the morning, and then these guys would roll in at 10:00 in the afternoon with ponytails and wearing duster jackets. It was back in the 90s, and I was like, what do they do?
Right. How do I do that?
Like, they're the copywriters. And I'm like, what's a copywriter, and how do you do that?
Yeah.
And so that's why I went back to school at Northwestern and got a degree. And I went to the journalism school, and they have a degree in advertising, and I got a degree in advertising, and that was that.
And here you are, all these years later.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very cool. And you wrote for Adidas for about 6 years. What was that like?
Yeah, it was.
That was in Europe, right? You were in Europe?
Yeah, it was here. It started out here. Right now, I live in Oregon, and it was here in Oregon. Half their headquarters is split 50-50 here, but they were founded in Germany. So I got a job here, worked here a couple of years. They asked me to go over to Germany, so I went over there, and that's when I became the kind of head writer at Adidas and started overseeing the gigantic story that is Adidas. And that was amazing. It was just, that was the first time, I had never traveled overseas in college or anything. So the first time I ever went overseas was a trip for Adidas, and it just blew my mind.
I'll bet. Yeah. And so was that where you experienced the brand framing shift we were talking about the other day?
Yeah, you know what? That's not where I figured it out, but that's where I came across basically the pain point. When I became global writing director, I was part of what I did. I started out writing, but by the end, a lot of what I did was just a lot of policing and going around and saying, hey, you can't say that. Like, that's not the Adidas brand. And trying to keep everyone kind of on one story. And the way I kind of see brands as, large or small, as kind of these story systems where you have products, and those product stories have to ladder up to a category story, which then has to ladder up to a business unit story probably, and then probably has to ladder up to your big brand, your reason for being here.
Right.
And, you have all these people off inventing really cool stuff and doing great work. You'd see stuff and no one was doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
It's just that no one was coordinating, and, people were just kind of inventing stories as they went just to sell things in. And you're like, that's not our brand at all. So,
and so where did you figure that out as it applies to framing and the shift in framing of a brand's ethos or message or something?
Yeah, that was, I did a project when I left. I did a project before I was actually even in got deep into the outdoor world. I worked in this company that had a whole bunch of apartments up and down the West Coast. And they were the company that actually the real estate company that leased Apple their first headquarters.
Oh, wow.
And they had no brand. They were just really good at buying low and selling high. And they wanted to bring in some investors, and the investors said, well, listen, you do a great job of buying low and selling high, but you need a brand, and we don't invest in anything if you don't have a brand. Yeah. So they came to me at Thre, and that was the first time I started going, I'm gonna write the story, because really, to be honest, I didn't love the brand myself, and I at that point I knew, like, I have to fall in love with the brand to get other people to love what you do.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I'm seeing all these apartments, and some of them I don't love, and some of them I think are great, but I have to find something I love about this, and then I have to write it down. And that was the first time I kind of did a story first, and I just wrote a paragraph that I felt really great about. Yeah. And then after that, everything seemed to go well. Everything kind of, once I wrote that story and I knew what this brand was about, we did interiors, we did retail, of retail interiors, and like changed how people gave tours of the buildings, changed the whole kind of experience of people who rent there. And it just changed everything. And that was the first eye-opening thing. And so after that, the big success there, I was like, I need to look into that, because
I think I'm onto something here. Yeah,
exactly. I think I'm onto something. I need to find more out about story.
Yeah. And so when you were with the apartment company, did you guys also marry the brand story to imagery?
Yeah. And actually that was the interesting thing, like even imagery. So for instance, that was a big breakthrough. What we figured out is back then, I know it's going to sound kind of, everyone will probably go like, oh yeah, of course, duh. But
these days, but back when you were doing it, right.
Back in the 2000s, what was driving me crazy is that everybody kept calling these things units. And I'm like, why a unit? Well, I don't want to live in a unit. Right. Why do we keep calling these things units? Right. They're homes. They're people raise their kids in these places. Yeah. These are homes. And so what the kind of the frame that we built for them and used for them is, home isn't the four walls. It's not the, stainless steel things. It's not the granite countertops. Home is what happens inside the four walls. Right. And so we concentrated everything we talked about was like, first birthdays and where you put the dog dish. And we did everything about creating a great home inside these apartments. Uh-huh. And it changed everything. And one of the things that I was working with this designer who I absolutely love the designer, and we had a great time working on this. But he was coming up with the photography was this big, beautiful photography of these apartment buildings. And I'm like, no, if it's home and we're talking about home, let's make it like human photography.
You got some people in there, yeah.
Exactly. People in there, take it like the mom took a picture of their kid, because that's what we want to make people feel like.
Very
you can
cool.
create a life there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that makes total sense. And you're right. It seems like such a no-brainer now, but back then when you were stumbling onto it, it was completely foreign to everybody.
Yeah,
and
now everyone. Go ahead.
Everyone does it. Yeah. Talk to us more about how Adidas shifted their framing away from we were talking about how they were, all these brands used to be warrior and competition and combat, and Adidas moved away from that. How did that come about?
Yeah, well, when we first started working on the Adidas narrative identity, we actually had the chance to work with an amazing woman in the UK, and she was a linguistic psychologist.
Oh, wow.
And what she was talking, and this is, I had no idea. I just knew how to write a story, and I knew, if I wrote a good one or a bad one. But she kind of let me in on framing and how we think in frames. And just before we talk about the frame within the sport industry, the thing that you have to know before that is that we all think in these invisible frames, these big metaphors. And so I think we were talking about them before, but when we're born, we're a blank slate. As a baby, 3 weeks old, we have no connections in our brains. And then so we're laying there in the crib, and then you cry, something's wrong, and your mom comes in and picks you up, and she goes, "Oh, you must be hungry." So she feeds you and she puts you back down. And then you start crying again and something's wrong, and your mom comes in and goes, "Oh, you need a diaper change." So she picks you up, changes your diaper, you feel better, and sets you back down. And this happens hundreds and thousands of times before you can even speak. And what happens is the idea of good and the idea of up grow together in your brain. And there's actually a synapse. The synapses connect so that you can't think of good without thinking of up, and up is good. And no matter where you go in the world, up is always good and good is always up. That's why the stock market is up and you feel up, and up is always positive. And so we think in all these invisible frames. And one of the things that we do is we look at the frames, the invisible frames that people think in within industries. And, you're working for years within an industry, and you're thinking in a way that everybody else thinks, and nobody thinks anything is different. And what we found in sport, every brand was thinking within this frame that sport is conflict. Sport is war. Winning takes care of everything. And, if I were to tell one of my writers to go out and drum up some headlines for a new running shoe, they'd come back and it would say destroy the road with these new XZ28 running shoes, blow up the competition. And you're like, why? Why are you equating everything as, and so it all comes from, NFL films and Nike, where everything was about domination. And, you don't even realize it, but sometimes when I tell that to people, they're like, well, sport is war, or sport is conflict. And you're like, well, I go on a trail run every day. And when I go to escape conflict.
Right. Yeah. There better not be any conflict. Yeah.
Exactly. I want to hear the birds chirping. So sometimes sport is war, but sometimes sport is something else. And what sport always is, it's, and this is what we did with Adidas. We reframed sport and said, okay, for Nike, sport is war, but to get out of Nike's frame and get out from the leader's frame, let's say sport is creation. It's always creation. You're always creating a better you. You come together to compete, to push each other further, to figure out how much better you can get. And so sport is always about creativity, and it's sometimes about conflict and competition.
That's amazing, because you're so right. And that up and that more concept ties into everything we do in life, right? You want more money. You want more stuff in your house. You want more this, more that. And it's really, that's what we're all about. It's interesting.
Yeah.
And so
it's amazing.
So Adidas was the first brand to shift that frame to creativity. That's great. Yeah,
they are now. If you go, look at them, there's, calling all creators. It's the creator brand. And the thing is that it's not really necessarily much about marketing. Like if you look at their marketing, they start talking about the creator brand, but we went into Adidas and we worked with their HR to create an employer brand so that they can recruit people, more creative people who, lived and breathed this mindset. We rewrote their principles of innovation so they could create more creative products and, kind of create products that are more interesting on many different levels for these creative types of people. And we basically went through and used story to change kind of almost everything at Adidas.
So you infused everything in the company. That's terrific. Yeah. And we were talking the other day about some other brands like Patagonia isn't so much creative. They're definitely not combative.
Yeah.
But they're more protection is that what we talked about?
Oh, actually,
caring for the earth.
That's part of it. Yeah. So if you look at, when you look at a frame, what you want to do is it's, basically brands that, are really successful. If you look back to when they grew the most, and the fastest, it was usually because there's a strong founder and they just thought this way. Like Apple is similar, Patagonia is similar. You had a strong founder who was like, no, this is the way it is. And then the brand becomes an extension of them.
Right.
And with Patagonia, for instance, I would say that the frame of Patagonia, if you look around and look at their retail spaces and look at their products and look at everything they do, it's that the wilderness is a loved one. Mm-hmm. So when they think of the wilderness, it's a relationship with someone they love. And so when you look at the retail spaces, it's open light. It looks like a living room, reclaimed furniture. You could stay there for hours and hang out. It feels like a place you want to interact with a loved one.
Yeah. And so your first business you started was Thre. That was your writing group, right? And then Talkoot grew out of Thre. Is that right?
That is right. Yeah. One of the things, so we do storytelling. We kind of start at the 30,000. Well, we can start anywhere, but we, use story. We help people with their story, brands with their story at the 30,000 foot level of like, who are we and what story are we living? But then that's great. But then if you actually get down to, all the way down to product descriptions, if that's not coming through your product descriptions, there's no reason to think about what that 30,000 foot story is. And what I found at Adidas was, even after we found their frame and understood what to do, it's a lot of hard work to make sure that everyone in the company and everything is living within that frame. And so you could think of like Apple, for instance, if you went to go buy like a new iPad Pro and you see the ads and you get inspired, you go to the website and the website's beautiful and slick and white and everything's clean and, and sophisticated and simple. And you go to the product description and it says, the new iPad Pro packed with 32 gigs of hard driving power.
Disconnect.
Total disconnect. And that's what we were finding with a lot of our clients. We were writing tons of product copy. We do a lot of product copy for brands, and I had to coach, 30 or 40 writers how to sound like one writer. And it was really hard to do that with spreadsheets and email. And so I actually I got sued by Afrika Bambaataa, 80s rap icon, because one of my writers he was bored one day and he thought that these shoes seemed like they were inspired by an Afrika Bambaataa lyric. And so he dropped some lyrics in there. Oops. And Afrika Bambaataa called up and said, I would like you to take that out or give me money.
Yeah. Wow.
And that's when I knew that I had to do something. So we created this kind of content collaboration software where all of our writers, editors, proofreaders, legal teams at the clients, product managers, brand managers can all log in. And it's kind of like an assembly line for great content,
Interesting.
Yeah. If you think of it, like when you create a product, the client or, someone creates a prototype and everyone likes that prototype, and then you send it out to be manufactured.
Yeah. There's a process, definite process.
It's a manufacturing process,
right.
And content needed that same thing. We have clients who say, here's our voice. And what we do is we go, okay, I understand that voice. We break it down. We understand how you kind of break it into its component parts. And then we figure out how to mass produce it so that we write right now, the writing studio Thre writes about 50,000 pieces of product copy a year.
Wow.
For lots of different clients. And each one of those comes out. And if you read it, it sounds just like, one person was channeling, writing that voice.
That's awesome. And do you work with all kinds of big and small clients in all different spaces? Not only the outdoor?
We are, yes. Yeah. We work with everyone from Tofurkey
Okay.
to business consultants, to Adidas and fishing. But we are, because we're based in Hood River and we have a whole bunch of people who move to the mountains and the water.
Right.
We have a whole bunch of people who love the outdoors, and so we naturally are drawn to the outdoor market.
That makes total sense, yeah. And how do you think branding is going to evolve in the next 5 to 10 years? I mean, obviously, this is going to continue to be an important strategy. You think it's going to move in a different? What direction do you think it's going to move?
Absolutely, I think you can already see that the era of disruptive advertising, like ads in magazines and banners, that's gone. That's going away, and it's going to go away even further. And what my take is, what happened, of course, it's digital disruption. Digital disruption is everywhere. Mm-hmm. But if you think about it, when I first started working at Adidas, probably after the first year, I knew something about Adidas, but I didn't know a whole bunch because it was really hard to get a hold of information back in 1997. Right. But now I can get online and within 4 hours, I can know more about Adidas than I knew after a year of working there back in 1997. I know their employment policies. I know their sustainability record. I know where their locations are. I can see their complete line. The transparency means that you don't anymore have that shell of advertising. Mm-hmm. Back in the day when I first started in advertising, I just loved the big headlines and the funny ads and whatnot. Yeah. But those were basically kind of like shells wrapped around, what everyone thought of as boring companies. And inside the boring company, you could be as boring as you want, as long as you had this marketing department that could kind of put lipstick on it and make it sexy. Mm-hmm. But now your employees are your advocates, your ambassadors. Yeah. When people come to your offices, they want to see that you live and breathe your brand every day. Right. And that's where what we do is we create narrative identities. And it's basically like a roadmap. It says, okay, if this is your story, this is what your offices might be like. This is what the content you create might be like. These are the kind of products you should create, so that it's just this one big holistic experience. And that's where, I think that's where everything is going. Is you're just going to get online and you just want to be part of a movement versus talked to with sexy advertising.
Right. And how do you think that's going to be impacted by this new trend we've seen recently? I'm going to use the term fake news for just lack of a better term, but there's a lot of stuff that's coming at us these days. When we dig right down into it, a few days, weeks, months later, we find out it was all fake. It was all made up. And it was totally wrong. Are you guys finding that you're having to battle against that? Is that impacting what you're doing?
That isn't necessarily, I can see that. It hasn't really impacted us. Mm-hmm. What we try and, basically what we've done is we've put together, kind of a methodology that we believe in. And that is kind of just be, rather than, it's funny, we're a writing studio and a marketing, we started out as a marketing studio, right? But basically, what we advocate is, if you know your story, you can stop marketing. You can just be who you are. And exactly. I go back
that's a good point.
Back to Patagonia.
Right.
The last time I heard the statistic was they spend 0.05% of their budget on marketing. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the way a brand does that, and that's, it's similar with other brands who have, taken the time to grow, and just be who they are, is that you just are that thing. And so people know who you are, and you don't have to kind of have news, and you don't have to kind of bang the drum. You just are.
Yeah. If you walk your talk every single day, every single minute, you don't have to explain anything.
Exactly. Yeah. People look at what you're doing and then they tell your story.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see how that evolves in the next 5 to 10 years in the current environment that we're in, with, things being shifted and things being manufactured, and you kind of have to do a double take sometimes. But I think you're right.
We are absolutely living in interesting times.
That's for sure. Yeah.
And I think one thing is that there's the big rise of direct consumer brands. The way I see it is, you used to, I equate it a lot to, beer because I like beer. In fact, it's Friday, and just after this, I'm going to go out and
there
have
you
a
go.
beer.
So am I.
But what happened in the brewing industry, back when I was a kid, my dad drank Budweiser, and there was Budweiser, there was Miller, and there's a couple of others, Pabst Blue Ribbon and Olympia. Yep. But pretty much there was just a few big, gigantic brands. Yep. And then craft brewing came along, and now, I would call craft brewing kind of agile beverage development. You have a whole bunch of small brands who are kind of living, seeing what they didn't like about beer and creating a new brewery. And they're launching beers, instead of just having one or two beers like Budweiser did, they're launching beers every month, and they're doing kind of like software development. They're like, try this. You like this? You like that? Right. And that's where I think sport and outdoor is going. Is it's almost going to become kind of agile product development. And the thing is that, and this gets back to kind of your narrative, is what's really great about these small brands is that they're making products about something. They're making products because they don't like, the way it's going now. And you can go to their website and they will tell you what it's about. And that's where marketing is going, is instead of kind of this slick advertising about, sexy models and whatnot, that's never going to go away. It's always going to be there. Yeah. But really, I love going to these websites going, oh yeah, they're going to be about this. They're about sustainability. They're about, something, and they're always going to be about that.
Right. And you're right. We're starting to see some of these brands expand that to everything they do. I mean, there for a while they would have this, this is our new organic, sustainable collection, and now it went from collection to category, and category to, it's the whole brand that they're about. That's kind of shifting. That's interesting to watch.
Right. That's the thing, is that, back in the day, you could have one collection about this and another collection about that, and a third collection about that. And we call that brand schizophrenia. That's the person that shows up at the party and just will agree to anything.
Drinks one of everything.
Exactly.
Has a miserable night.
Yeah. You can create anything as long as all those things are about one thing.
Yeah. No, I love that. Yeah. It makes total sense. Yeah. No, that's pretty exciting. I look forward to talking with you more about that and seeing some of the stories that you create. So let's shift gears a little bit and tell us about some of the. Do you do any work with any nonprofits?
Oh, you know what? We're doing work right now. We kind of choose one thing to work on and just concentrate on that instead of spreading our work around. And one thing that we're working on right now is with a small website called Immigrant Story.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and it's a retired engineer. He is originally from Pakistan, and he, saw what was going on right now, and he just wanted to have immigrants tell their story.
That's awesome.
And tell kind of the other side of it, and what it's like, and so we are diving in right there and helping him to tell better stories and figure out what his frame is, and kind of set him up almost as if he's a magazine. Where it's like,
cool, yeah.
A magazine, you pick up Fast Company or you pick up,
Wire,
The Economist.
Or whatever. Yeah, right.
Yeah. Pick up Fast Company, pick up The Economist. They're both about business, but they're actually not about business.
Right.
The Fast Company is about moving fast and breaking things and figuring out, it's about the future.
Right.
The Economist is like delving deep and becoming an expert in some field.
Right.
And so, no matter what comes along, like it could be Valentine's Day coming up, or it could be, some new thing happens and the recession happens along, and you're always going to report about what's new, but you're going to have your take on it. So what we want to do with him is, and the Immigrant Story is, what is it always going to be about for him? It's what are the immigrant stories going to be about? What slice are they, going to reveal about immigration?
And he could go a lot of different ways with that, because it can be just, not only one person, but like my family came from immigrants, a couple generations ago. So he could go, pretty far back, as far back as he wants, or he can just start about someone who's brand new, just came here, stepped off the plane. Now what do I do?
Yep, exactly.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And what are some of the outdoor activities you participate in?
Oh, right now my heart belongs to trail running.
Okay, very nice.
I moved out here originally. I was from the Midwest, and me and my friends would jump in a car on Friday in Chicago and drive up to Upper Peninsula, Michigan, and in the middle of January, and and camp on the shores of Lake Superior.
Oh my God!
Build an igloo in -3-degree weather, just because we so wanted to be outdoors, and we just felt so out of place in Chicago.
That's hardcore.
Yeah. So we actually, me and those two friends, all moved out to Portland and Seattle, and spent our 20s and 30s climbing and backcountry skiing and mountaineering. And then I had kids, and all my hobbies had to squeeze down into 3 hours.
Right. Well, you go on a nice trail run in 3 hours.
Oh yeah. But lots of skiing on Mount Hood, and my daughters love paddleboarding, so I do a lot of paddleboarding.
Oh, cool.
now.
Awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
And do you have any suggestions or advice for someone wanting to get into the outdoor biz or get into writing or storytelling?
Yeah, I think, I have, when I left Adidas, I started freelancing. And when you work for a big company, oftentimes there's a lot to grumble about. And it's easy to grumble because you have a boss, and they have a boss's boss, and they have a boss's boss's boss. And there's so many things impacting what you do that it's easy to grumble. But then when it's just freelancing, you can't grumble anymore because you don't have a boss.
It's you. Yeah, right.
It's you. And you're like, well, you got yourself into this.
Yeah.
How do you get yourself out of it? And it gave you, at first it was a weird thing, but then I was like, oh my gosh, I can do anything I want. I can work for anyone I want. You know what? And as long as I was able to be financially independent, and that doesn't mean being rich by any means.
Mm-hmm.
If my expenses are underneath my revenue, I can do anything I want.
Yeah, exactly.
And it gave me an insane amount of freedom. And so I would just volunteer work. I'd just go ask people to do stuff. Sometimes clients would pay me for one thing, and then I would go and do this whole other thing along with what they paid me for.
Uh-huh.
And I'd come in and I'd present, you wanted a headline, but here I'm going to tell you why, this headline is better. And I read up about storytelling, and here's why you want this headline versus that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would just start doing work for people I wanted. And, I was always into the outdoors. And so, it was just a natural thing. I would just call up outdoor companies and say, hey, let me give you a free talk.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Let me fly down and tell you about story. And, it always resonated, and started working, with one brand and then another, and we're deep into it.
That's awesome. Congratulations. That's great. That's good advice too. That allows you to be independent.
Yeah.
And do you have any daily routines you use to keep your sanity? Obviously a trail run is on that list, I would think, or some kind of a run.
There's two daily routines that, I'm getting in my small town, famous for, and that is starting out every day from 7:30 in the morning till 10 at the coffee shop. Same table, same food, same everything.
Same group of guys? Do you have one of those you guys get together?
Yeah.
And it's awesome. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. And that keeps me sane. And there's I love routine.
Me too. Yeah. Yeah. That's
when you have the routine, then you can be creative in other ways.
Exactly.
But when you have that routine, you can just know when you wake up what's going to happen for the next 2 hours.
Yeah, exactly. It allows you to start the day or finish the day on your terms. Yeah.
Yeah. And then that trail run, I have to say that, I think way back in the day when I first started running, I felt like a person who was out of shape who would sometimes run. And like when I ran and got in shape, I'd feel like it was a bonus.
Yeah.
But anymore, once you start doing it every single day, you feel like once you stop running, you feel like there's, you've entered a hole and there's something missing in your life.
Yep. I'm the same way. Yep. Exercise routines are important.
Yeah.
And what are some of your favorite books? Or do you give books as gifts very often?
Absolutely. Yeah. We have a whole wall, a big shelf devoted to all the books. I have a big stack of books all the time next to my bed that I read. And mostly about psychology and kind of these frames and how we think and how we think and how we actually think. I love the idea that, there's some sort of reality out there, but we're never going to be able to see it because our brain mediates
Yeah.
what that reality is, and it only lets certain stuff in.
Well, and like we talked about earlier, from the time you're a little baby getting picked up, our brain is so hardwired in certain ways that we could want to completely shift it, but we're not going to get out of this hardwired situation.
Exactly. And so I love reading books that get me up out of my own thinking and make me challenge my own thinking.
Yeah.
So there was a great book. It was really, there's one big tome that kind of is the Bible. It's called Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow. And it talks about our two brain processes. One is our automatic emotional brain that makes most of our decisions. And then there's the slower rational brain that kicks in, hopefully, and and kind of post-rationalizes those decisions that your emotions made. And so it goes through all the different kind of biases we have in our thinking and how we kind of do these, our brain does these sleights of hand. And we think we've thought rationally through something. Right. And in fact, we haven't at all.
Yeah. That's awesome. We'll have to link to that one.
Yeah. Then the short version of that, which is also really entertaining and quick read, is called How We Decide.
Oh, cool.
And it's all about how we make decisions every day. Do we want, toasted Pop-Tarts, or do we want, quinoa?
Right.
And why we decide one way or another, and how we think we decide and how we actually decide.
Right. Awesome. Yeah, those are great. We'll link to those in the show notes. I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff, because it's just, you wonder, I said I didn't want to do that. Why am I now doing that?
Oh, that is amazing. Yeah. I can be alone for hours thinking, now why did I have that thought?
Yeah.
When does that thought break down?
Right.
Is love and truth, are those two exactly the same things? I don't think so.
Yeah, they go around in circles sometimes.
Exactly. Oh, totally.
Yeah. And do you have a favorite outdoor gear purchase under $100?
I absolutely, it's funny. I was taking a look at that and thinking about that, and I have several. Okay. But one rose up, and I was like it wasn't the first thing to come to mind, but then once it hit, I was like, oh my gosh, that's so funny. I didn't think about that first. And it's my Patagonia Houdini jacket.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah. I've heard somebody else mention that. Yeah.
It's just, it just packs down to nothing. You can take it traveling. I take it on runs, and I break it out if it gets cold. I use it in the summer. I use it in the winter. It's just, you can do it on, pull it out while you're, belaying. It's just the everywhere, just enough, windbreak jacket.
That's a good one. We'll link to that too. That's awesome. And as we go to finish here, is there anything you want to say to the audience or ask of our audience?
I think the one thing is, for me, is to be, especially if you want to get into kind of, actually in business in general. The one thing that I would say is that it's hard to help other people when you can't get up out of your own thinking. And so
that's awesome. I love it.
The one word of advice is constantly challenge your own thinking, because if you come into a situation with automatic thinking, you can't help anybody else get out of their automatic thinking. And most of the world's problems is because we're stuck in our own automatic thought patterns. That's a great
thought. Yep. I love that. Put your own oxygen mask on first.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. I use that exact phrase often.
That's great. I love that. Yeah. And how can people find you if they want to reach out to ask questions or follow up on anything they heard? Yeah,
we are at Thread_creative on Twitter, threadcreative.com. On the interwebs, and also Talkoot.com is the software company that helps you tell thousands of different product stories, all consistently and quickly.
Cool. Well, we'll link to all those in the show notes. Make sure everybody can find it. Well, thanks, Brian. It's been great. I almost called you Bill. I don't know why I did that. But
That's no problem.
Maybe I interviewed Bill this morning.
Yeah.
No, that's been awesome. Thanks. I enjoyed our talk the other day, and I think this stuff is just fascinating to me to see how it evolves and see how brands embrace it and evolve it. My perspective is you guys are going to be pretty busy moving forward, so that's great.
Yeah, it's ramping up, and
cool.
it's going I think branding in general and business is going in a good direction right now.
Yeah, good for you. Well, thanks.
Even if the rest of the world isn't.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, I appreciate the time.
Thank you very much, Rick.
All right,
you
thanks.
Too.
Yep, bye-bye.
All right, bye.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Brian Hennessy. You can catch up with him on the socials at thread_creative on Twitter, threadcreative.com, and talkoot.com. You'll find links to everything we discussed in the show notes at theoutdoorbizpodcast.com/episodes/080. Be sure to hit your favorite podcast app and subscribe today. Thanks for listening. Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. I've used Audible for many years now. I'm on the road a lot, and Audible allows me to enjoy the great books I discover or are recommended by friends. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/theoutdoorbizpodcast. There are over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Start your 30-day free trial with Audible today. If you want more of the Outdoor Biz Podcast, you can subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcast. Be sure and go to theoutdoorbizpodcast.com where you find all the episodes, show notes, and much, much more. Thanks for listening, and until next time, be sure to make time to get outside.